Welcome to Sydney Cemetery History Tours. Today's theme is Cads, Rakes and Adultery. We're going to visit 2 graves at Camperdown Cemetery and 1 at South Head. So here we are in Camperdown Cemetery. This is the first of our 3 stories with Cads, Rakes and Adulterers. We're at the grave of Ernestine De Satge. Not many family disputes are cast in stone, but here we go. We're looking at one right here. You will note that a name has been scrubbed out, and it's not due to vandals. This has been professionally commissioned by the family of Ernestine. We're at the grave of Ernestine De Satge. She's the daughter of Valentine Ernest De Satge, and she was born in 1833. She died in 1864. She was 31 years of age. She married a Gordon Sandyman in 1862. Gordon was 52 at the time of the marriage, and he was reputedly a cousin of Oscar Wilde. Gordon was a friend of Ernestine's brother, Oscar, who was a squatter and politician. So it seems that's how Ernestine and Gordon became acquainted. Gordon travelled from Brisbane to Sydney in December 1861. On his way to London, they met and married in London in April. So it was clearly a bit of a quick romance. Let's break that trip down a little bit. It would have taken, with stops, about 2 months to get to the UK from Sydney. So they met about late February, and that's if they met as soon as he got off the ship. So that leaves courtship, including engagement, of about 4 weeks, followed by the marriage. She was 29 and he was aged about 53, 54. Gordon came to Australia in 1838 as a merchant, but his business failed. He lived in Queensland as a pastoralist. He bought a station in 1844 in the Moreton Bay district and expanded to become a large landholder. In 1856, he was a member of the New South Wales Parliament. That was at a time when Queensland was still a part of the New South Wales colony. He and Ernestine had only been married for 2 years when she died. Ernestine and Gordon went to Sydney. He had to go to Sydney a lot for parliamentary sittings. So she went down to Sydney for a change of air and was on the cusp of returning back to Queensland when she was suddenly seized with a violent spasmodic attack that was described as arrested digestion, and it proved terminally fatal. She probably arrived at Camperdown Cemetery as her brother Oscar had married into the Tooth brewing family, and some of the Tooth family were buried at Camperdown. Camperdown was a kind of preferred choice with its semi-rural setting, as Devonshire Street Cemetery was getting a bit built out and was just seen as a little bit too inner city. This is before the opening of Rookwood out at Lidcombe. In 1863, Gordon Sandyman was elected to the Queensland Parliament. He returned to England in 1887 and remained there until his death in 1897. Queen Victoria granted approval and signed the letters patent in 1859 to establish the colony of Queensland. In 1863, Gordon was elected into the Queensland Parliament. He didn't have to come down to Sydney often as he used to, and very much cut his ties with Sydney. So Oscar, Ernestine's brother, had left Australia and had gone back to England. Now, he did come out occasionally to check on his land holdings up in Queensland and other places in 1883, 1888 and 1893, and he visited to inspect properties that he owned in regional areas. It's one of these times it's most likely that the headstone was altered. You'll note that a name has been scrubbed out, and it's not due to vandals. It's been professionally done, commissioned by the family of Ernestine, and namely the brother Oscar. Gordon had upset the family of the dead wife by remarrying shortly after Ernestine had died. I expect he had a lot on his hands, what with being in Parliament and dealing with his land holdings. Ernestine's death had left him with a toddler, Henry Ernest Sandyman. Letters between Ernestine's family members had the term "with indecent haste," and I expect that's this indecent haste that pushed Oscar over the edge to have the stone altered. The scrubbed out words, Gordon Sandyman MLA, the second line and the last word is assembly. So it's like legislative assemblies, but they scrubbed out assembly. Gordon was one of those rare parliamentarians who had been expelled from Parliament. His infraction was quite minor, yet convenient in the scheme of things. I say convenient due to his unapologetic use of slaves on his properties, and he was a fan of blackbirding. This involved bringing slaves and indentured labour to Australia from the Pacific Islands. It started in about the 1860s, and they were taken to plantations in Queensland and often forced. Many were kidnapped or blackbirded by labour agents, and others were told lies about what they could expect in Australia. He was known to chase down escapees and track them and return them to their slave existence. This was at a time when slavery had been already on the nose and had been abolished in the UK and the USA. So here we are at South Head. This superb white marble headstone was carved by Rainer Hoff. Rainer Hoff was in the midst of creating the sculptures for the Anzac War Memorial in Hyde Park. He'd been commissioned by his drinking buddy Fortis Wheeler to produce Eleanor's headstone. Now, this is quite a tale of infidelities that would have gone through to the keeper had it not been for the headstone Fortis had supplied to his second wife Eleanor. Rainer had been embroiled in controversy with the Catholic archbishops over the morality and form and symbolism of a sculpture that had been commissioned by the Anzac War Memorial. So I guess it's no surprise that there is a somewhat racy depiction of a mother figure protecting 4 children with various symbolisms. It is high Art Deco, it's classical, a lyrical work combining sensuous curves and geometrical patterns. It's striking in its beauty. It would have been absolutely glowing when it was brand new. By 1937, Rainer Hoff's drinking had taken his toll on him. Hoff died of pancreatitis on the 17th of November 1937 at Waverley. Now to the occupants of this plot. Contained in this plot is Fortis Wheeler and his wife Eleanor and their daughter, also known as Eleanor. Fortis was born in 1871 in Burma. His family moved to Australia shortly after that time. He married his first wife, Frances, in 1894. He was aged 23. Fortis was divorced by Frances, and he was about 36 at the time, and she was a journalist for the Bulletin, and he was the advertising manager. He was described as a big gun in the advertising world, and he was the boss of... Named in the divorce proceedings with this was an actress called Mabel Gorrie. Fortis was a hard-drinking, hard-smoking womanizer, and as was the custom and culture in the advertising industry, just think like Mad Men, right? He was the Don Draper of the early 1900s through to the mid-1930s. Mrs. Frances Wheeler first heard about the affair Fortis was involved with in 1904, but reconciled with her husband. But when it became apparent that the affair was continuing, she decided to proceed with the divorce and saw through the action at the second attempt. She stated her suspicions were confirmed in 1906 and thinks that the affair started in 1905 with liaisons between the two of them in New South Wales, namely in Darlinghurst and Hunters Hill. Due to complications with the divorce, Frances lived with Fortis until July 1908, and he was possibly having an affair with another woman at this time who became the second Mrs. Wheeler. That's our woman in the grave, Eleanor Wheeler. The first marriage was dissolved in a divorce in July 1908. Mrs. Eleanor Wheeler was born in 1878. Eleanor had 2 children at the time of being married to Fortis. So there's Fortis and 2 stepchildren. So July 1908 was the divorce, and the first child born to Fortis and Eleanor was in October 1908. The divorce was dissolved in July 1908. Fortis married Eleanor very quickly after the divorce and became Mrs. Eleanor Wheeler. She was aged 30. Eleanor Wheeler was born to the married couple in 1908. So that's the daughter. By 1932, the stepchildren were well and truly adults, and Eleanor, the daughter born to Fortis and Eleanor, was aged 23. So here's the obituary for Eleanor Wheeler. Mrs. Eleanor Wheeler died at her home, Alston Gardens, Bellevue Hill, yesterday, 7th of November 1932, aged 54. She was the wife of Mr. Fortis Wheeler, advertising manager and director of the Associated Newspapers, Pty Limited. Mrs. Wheeler is survived by Mr. Wheeler, 2 daughters and a son. The interment will take place this afternoon at South Head Cemetery, following a service at All Saints, Woollahra, at 3 o'clock. The next time we come across Fortis in the newspaper, he's being named as a party in the divorce in Riley versus Riley. There's a graphic designer at his office called Mr. Riley. Fortis is having an affair with his wife. He marries Dorothy Riley in 1935, and in 1936, a son, John, is born. Now, if you have a look at the stone, it already includes 4 children, where Mrs. Eleanor Wheeler's obituary states that there were 3 at the time. So I'm pretty sure Rainer Hoff carved that fourth child in because they knew it was coming. Now, Mr. Fortis Wheeler, he died on the 27th of February 1937. He was a hard-drinking, hard-smoking character whose addictions no doubt caught up with him. He died at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. He was having a leg amputated because it had no circulation. His legs because it had developed gangrene. This was from his hard drinking and hard smoking lifestyle. Dorothy Wheeler, he received £64,325 in the estate, as well as the house at Bellevue Hill, and lived a further 20 years. She married again and became Dorothy Gilchrist. Dorothy died on the 15th of June 1954 and is buried at Waverley. At Camperdown Cemetery, up the back, under a tree, is a white marble cross with lead letters. Eliza Emily Donnithorne, born approximately 1826 and died in 1886. She was recluse and eccentric. She was born at the Cape of Good Hope, and she was the youngest daughter of James Donnithorne and his wife, Sarah. Her father was a descendant of an old Cornish family and joined the East India Company as a writer. He became Master of the Mint and then on to becoming a judge. About 1836 he retired to Sydney, where he joined many public movements and one renowned for his unbounded hospitality. He invested in real estate and twice visited Melbourne to buy land. He settled at Cambridge Hall, which was 36 King Street, Newtown, where he died on the 25th of May 1852. He was survived by two sons who had joined the British Army and later settled in England, and by Eliza, who inherited the most of his estate. Eliza, who never fully recovered from being jilted on her wedding day, is wrongly reputed as being the inspiration for Charles Dickens' Miss Havisham in his novel Great Expectations. It's a little bit like the chicken and the egg. There are some pretty good pointers as to why Eliza is perhaps the inspiration, but then there's also some pretty good facts as to why she isn't. Maybe she was influenced by Miss Havisham, or maybe Dickens was influenced by the story of Eliza. It's one of those unwritten things in history that we'll perhaps never know the actual answer to. But I'm leaning towards Dickens writing the book first and Eliza being influenced by the book. It's fair to say that Dickens had no idea of Eliza's existence when he wrote the book, but based the famous character on an experience which befell an innkeeper named Nathaniel Bentley. Poor old Nathaniel, he was a bit of a dandy in his time, but following the death of his fiancée on their wedding day, he refused to wash or clean for the rest of his life and lived in squalor. His house and warehouse became so filthy that he became a celebrity of dirt. Any letter addressed to the Dirty Warehouse, London, would be delivered to Bentley. He stopped trading in 1804 and died in 1809. The warehouse was later demolished. Dickens knew of this story and was fascinated by the myth of one who sealed up the door on the wedding breakfast and left the cake and the table decorations to acquire dust eternally. In a letter to a printer on his weekly publication, Household Words, dated 30 December 1852, he wrote, "Don't leave out the dirty old man, he is capital." And it's been suggested that Nathaniel Bentley was the inspiration for Miss Havisham character in Great Expectations, even though, yes, there was a gender change. Nearly every suburb in Sydney has had its house of mystery. It was generally an old house set well back from the road and partially hidden by trees and shrubbery. Its roof and gutters were rusted, its paint and plastered were flaking off the walls. The supposed literary link between Dickens and Donnithorne was forged by popular imagination, for the circumstances in which the solitary woman lived and died invariably conjured up a picture of a creature such as Miss Havisham. Newtown's house of mystery was on the main street, King Street, at the corner of Georgina. It was a portion of Captain Bligh's grant, and the house was named Camperdown Lodge until later it got changed to Cambridge Hall. The house was purchased in the 1840s by James Donnithorne, a retired judge, and he lived there for about 10 years. After his death in 1852, his daughter dwelt alone in the house except for the companionship of two women servants. Eliza, left with a large inheritance, became well known for her benevolence, but she never allowed anyone but clergymen and her doctor into the house. Callers were received by one of the maids, who took the message and returned with the answer, but always behind a partially open door. As Newtown became increasingly urbanised, cottages and terraces arose in the vicinity of Cambridge Hall, and the gossip kicked over regarding the quiet house behind the Norfolk Island pines and the lonely woman who lived in it. As the years went on, the gossip turned into one familiar story, and the story kind of goes like this. After the death of the judge, the daughter became engaged. The wedding day arrived and a feast was prepared. The guests assembled. Carriages were at the gates to convey the happy party to and from the church. The bride was ready when she received a message that the bridegroom had disappeared. The wedding must be postponed. The guests were informed and departed, leaving the bride to her sorrow. From that day on, she would wear nothing but her wedding dress, and the door never closed, in the hope that the bridegroom may return. The wedding breakfast remained on the dining table and gradually mouldered away until nothing was left but dust and decay of a fair young bride who was never to have been. Dickens was supposedly told of this strange story by one of his sons who'd come to Australia and put this tale in Great Expectations and changed the name from Donnithorne to Havisham. He also changed Camperdown Lodge to Satter's House. In trying to establish a link between Dickens and Donnithorne, I found that two of Dickens's sons had made it to Australia and that they'd gotten here in 1865 and then another one joined in 1869. Great Expectations came out as a three-part story in 1860 to 1861, which is a good 5 years before the brothers even arrived here. Now, some of the things that link the Dickens boys is they were a good friend of a guy called Dr. William Bland. Dr. William Bland owned most of Ashfield. You'll note that there's still Bland Street in Ashfield. Bland was Donnithorne's doctor and was one of the few people who was allowed into the house. So there was a link between some Dickens relatives and Donnithorne via this doctor. But as I said, the book was well and truly written by the time the Dickens boys arrived. So it seems that Miss Donnithorne probably had nothing to do with the Dickens story, but on the contrary, Dickens' story is perhaps what inspired Eliza Donnithorne.